Hey, I'm just in my car driving to work, and basically I wanted to do a quick response to a video Philip Franco made, and just kind of explain how Philip doesn't really get it, and this is why people who are male and white, or even Hispanic, voted for Trump. Basically, I'm in the military, and I'm getting deployed, and ever since 2014, under Barack Obama, they made this special caveat for deployments, where normally if you go for a year or 400 days, you actually get health care 6 months before and 6 months after you arrive, you get deployed. That way your family's taken care of, you're taken care of. You don't have to worry about these logistics right before and right after you deploy. Under these special orders, this healthcare is actually cut. I don't have access to healthcare before I deploy. The day I deploy is when I get my healthcare, and that's the day my family gets their healthcare. So if something happens to them, I've got to worry about co-pays, I've got to worry about this, I've got to worry about that, and it kind of sucks because the day I get back, I have to worry about it as well. I don't have time to, a lot of people like to decompress, like to take a little bit of time with their family, but no, it's like you're right to logistics, right to figuring out what to do next when you get back. So healthcare got cut under these caveats passed under Barack Obama. Additionally, I no longer have access to my 9/11 GI Bill. Normally, if I went on this deployment, I would get a certain amount of benefits, a certain amount of pay. They'd cover tuition, cover my books, stuff like that, because I'm serving my country. And this is what was promised to me when I signed up. Under this new system, under these special orders, that's actually completely cut. And it's not cut for everyone. Like, these things aren't cut for everyone. These things are still true if you're active duty or whatever, but since I'm in the reserves, I actually don't get access to these things. They just don't have the budget for it. I didn't volunteer for the deployment either. I'm in non-voluntary deployment, which means I have to go or I have to quit. And so obviously I signed up to serve my country. I'm going to do that regardless. But it sucks that that I'm paying for these budget cuts with my health care, with my education. And maybe I wouldn't go to college necessarily, but I could pass on to my kids, and I could know that at least one of my kids would go to college for free and get paid to go, etc., etc. Anyways, what's really frustrating about this transgender debate is that when these budget cuts come for normal people, for people who aren't victims, quote-unquote victims, for white males, no one lifts a finger, no one bats an eye. This has been happening for years, and I haven't seen Philip Franco do one story about it. People just get screwed over. I don't have access to health care. The access I'm supposed to have, the access I was promised. And yet, the second Trump says, oh, hey, we don't have the budget to cover transgender healthcare for transgender individuals, and therefore we can't let them serve. Philip Franco's out there making a video. What is this? Why is there so much attention paid to so few people who are considered oppressed, when the rest of us who are paying for this off of our backs, the majority of people, don't know? There's zero concern. No one cares, and that's super frustrating, and that's why people do vote for Trump, because I'm tired of hearing about this constantly in the news, and literally no one batting an eye for my concerns. No one cares about what I'm paying for, about how I just lost, $100,000 over 5 years because of these special orders that Barack Obama allowed to pass. Anyways, that's not a big deal. The other thing is that Philip Franco is also wrong on his facts. Look, being transgender, it doesn't matter what you think. There are huge health costs associated with it. You inject yourself with testosterone or estrogen for all that time, your risks of cancer go through the roof. Okay, mental instability through the roof, suicide through the roof. And these are costs the military doesn't want to pay for. And anyone who's ever joined, anyone who's ever even looked into joining, knows that the military is very, very particular on who they let in. They don't let in people who have had asthma. They don't let in people who only have one leg. Look, it's just hard. Like, if you have cancer, they're not going to let you join the military. You can get a waiver if you have a lot of these issues, and you get cured or whatever. You can get waivers sometimes, but it's very hard because the military, if it turns out you're on active duty and you develop cancer, the military is going to cover you for the rest of your life. And there's this really big issue where people who get sick join the military just so that they will then be covered. You will be surprised how many people find out they have cancer right when the day they join basic training or AIT or something, which is fine. If the military made a promise and they should be held to that promise, and you can find out you have cancer anytime. So I'm sure the vast majority of these cases are legitimate, but you do have this issue where people lie when they join the military. They lie about their health circumstances so they can get in, and then once they're in, the military ends up paying for them forever. And these are huge costs. And the thing is that if you're paying these huge costs out for healthcare, you don't necessarily have the money to pay for other things, like everyone's GI Bill, like everyone else's healthcare. And yes, I know you gave this like ridiculous statistic about how big the military budget is and how small it would cost to pay for healthcare for transgender individuals, but that is a very flawed statistic. Look, they're at a point where they're literally cutting GI bills and healthcare for people who are serving, people who are completely healthy, and that means morale is low. Plenty of people quit the guard, or basically tap out, right? There are different ways you can quit, but they essentially quit the guard when they don't have to, because they don't want to get deployed under these circumstances. They don't want to lose $100,000 over 4 or 5 years, and have time away from their family, time away from their job. For a lot of people, it is a sacrifice. They get paid less when they get deployed than at their normal job, and it's so frustrating to see the national conversation like this. No, you should not be able to serve your country just because you want to. It's not about you wanting to. It's if you are qualified to. It's if you can serve your country. It's not everyone deserves a right to. Look, if you're paralyzed from the neck down, you can't serve your country. If you have asthma, you can't serve your country. Not as the military. Why? Because if you go down range and they don't have the proper pills for you, if you don't have the proper inhaler or whatever, then you might die in your liability to your unit. You might get other people killed because they're concerned about you and they're there protecting you when you have an asthma attack, when they need to be covering their own backs. Look, Trump is correct when he says we need the most lethal, most effective fighting force. And time after time, they've shown that whenever you make these little caveats, you actually make the military much less lethal. There's a study that came out years ago after they allowed women into the military, into the front lines in a way they never did before. They did this study finding, oh look, it turns out that units that are mixed gender are actually way less effective, way less lethal than units that are only men. And this has a lot to do with how competitive men are. And I experienced this when I was going through basic training. A lot of people will kind of break the rules or kind of, joke around, mess around in basic training, just kind of to impress ladies. I totally understand why you would be less lethal as a mixed gender group. And look, maybe it's still better to utilize your entire population. That's not my decision to make. But at the same time, it does have an impact, and that's what the studies show. Lastly, something again Philip DeFranco doesn't understand, because he's never served, A, and B, he's never probably even looked into serving, because he would probably know this. It's a very big deal. Sharp. You can get basically sent to jail. You can get thrown out very easily if you commit a Sharp violation. Sharp is sexual harassment. Anything like that. If you make a lewd comment, if you touch someone inappropriately. And it's so difficult when you have transgender individuals, because if you're a guy, the issue is that one of the more complicated things is that it depends on just how the woman feels. So if you say, hey, your uniform's looking nice today, if you say it to a guy, no big deal, right? Because if you're a guy saying it to a guy, because you fix each other's uniforms or whatever, that's no big deal. You're just squaring someone away. If you do that with a woman and she feels like it's more of a sexual comment, you can actually get kicked out of the army for something like that. And it's very easy. It happens to people. And the issue is what if a guy decides that he wants to see ladies and just says he's transgender, and all of a sudden women don't, and whether that's legitimate or not, it doesn't matter. If women feel violated in some way. So, like, as a woman, you can sexually harass another woman. And so even if the military treats you as a woman, if other women do not feel comfortable around you for whatever reason, then, you just get this really big issue with sexual harassment. And the military takes it so seriously that, careers are going to end left and right when this stuff goes down. I don't know. It's hard to stress how seriously the Army takes this stuff to people who haven't been in, and how big of an issue it is. Anyways, just a couple of things that, people vote Trump because they feel, look, I know Philip DeFranco he says he gets $200,000 a year and he plows the rest into his business. That's really not an accurate portrayal of how much he makes, because if you're plowing into a business, that's optional. You don't have to plow it back into the business. But he himself consumes $200,000. For the rest of us who don't make nearly that much, who have to live as peasants, it's really frustrating when our healthcare gets cut. It's really frustrating when the benefits I was promised about school, about college, about this, about that, get cut because the Army doesn't have the budget. And yet these people are coming out in droves, calling the president a bigot, this, that, because he doesn't make the time, the money for a very small segment of the population. And lastly, there's a lot of health. I know I mentioned this before. There's a ton of health issues associated with being transgender, and the issue is if downrange, you go downrange somewhere, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq, and there's an issue for some reason, then there's a ton of resources that have to be placed into making sure you're okay and making sure you're recovered, you get your medicine and whatnot. Anyways, just some stuff to think about. I don't really think Phil is gonna see this. If he does, I hope he responds. Anyways, good luck.